My name is Jay Phelan. It's pronounced Phelan. I will be your instructor for this class. I am a total newspaper addict. First thing I do when I get up in the morning, in fact, that's how psychologists define addiction, and it is how soon is it from the time you get up in the morning till you have to engage in whatever this behavior is. And usually I'll get up in the morning and I have a young baby and he's usually crying and wants a bottle, but I get out of bed, and even before I go there I have to just quick glance at my screen and quickly check New York Times, CNN, MSNBC. I can usually get 3 newspapers in before he goes too ballistic. But here's a question. I can't help it. I read articles, like for instance in the New York Times recently, they had an article called The He Hormone. And here's what it said. It said, as testosterone becomes increasingly available, more is being learned about how men and women are not created equal. So let's accept it and move on. And there was this very long article about how behavior is influenced by testosterone. And I read that and I want to know, should I believe this? Is testosterone responsible for rage? Is it responsible for bad behavior? And I'm not sure. I read the article and I have to decide, can I believe this? The LA Times had an article that was called Instant Polygraph Test Developed. Mayo Clinic researchers have developed an instant lie detector technique that picks up mini hot flushes around the eyes and could lead to such tests becoming standard at airport check-ins. I read that and I think, well, is that bogus? I mean, obviously they intended it. It's not like a joke story, but is it real? Is that a true thing? Newsweek had an article last year that was titled Genes Linked to Obsessive Grooming. As I saw that, and they literally said, primping is an important survival behavior, mice study suggests. So does that mean that if you have certain types of genes, you're going to want to sort of spend more time looking at all the different conditioners that are possible for you to use, or the hair care products after that, shampoo, you're going to get all excited about that? I don't know. Newsweek wrote it. I have to decide whether or not I want to believe that. And this prompts me to realize that the number of social and political issues now that hinge on scientific data or scientific theories is increasing. Now, I'm assuming that almost none of you are science majors, so you're not going to spend a whole lot of time on South Campus, but you're going to be confronted by stories every day, if you read newspapers, if you watch TV news, that are going to put forth things that require you to make a decision about some scientific statement they've made. Should I believe that, or is that not true? And what that means is that you have to have a little bit of scientific literacy these days, whether you like science or don't like science. And I feel like increasingly it's a new age, and science, as a scientist, I kind of like it, but science is being pushed to the fore. It's not just confined to South Campus. So you look, what else? I saw a couple of other things. This is just from a legal journal. So if you're thinking of going to law school at some point, whose genes are they? Insurers and government agencies want to see your personal code of life, and no law is stopping them. Or, a silly one like this was LA Times, whether or not this woman should get custody of the genes that used to be her boyfriend's, but he died. Who gets custody of them? And it's not clear. So this is one of the goals that I have in this class, is that I want to make you more scientifically literate. I want to make you feel like when someone tells you a bit of scientific information, you are equipped to say, well, how do you know that? Why do you know that? Well, could it be this? I want you to be a better, more discerning consumer of scientific information. Not that you have to not believe everything, but you just have to know, can you believe it? Some of the things that we're going to cover in this class, I'll go down the list. I just made a list. We're going to talk about evolution. Why is it so controversial and threatening to a lot of people? What is it about it? We're going to ask more personal questions as well. I have this one up here. Is there any such thing as unconditional love among friends? This couple, they look very happy in spite of his hair. But is unconditional love a true thing? And if it's not, what are the conditions? And why do we have those particular conditions? Or why is it that we're nicer to our family members than we are to complete strangers? I see a lot of movies, and if you watch Sylvester Stallone movies, you'll notice that he puts his brother Frank in every movie that he's in. Frank is a terrible, terrible actor. But he's always there. Why is Sylvester Stallone putting Frank in all the movies? Why is it that we do kinder things for our family members and close relatives than for people who are not related to us? We can get some insight into that from biology. Or we could look at this, and we can ask the question whether or not beauty is just a cultural construct, or is it a quantifiable human universal? We know it's Claudia Schiffer on the left, right? She's very, very pretty. Who's the guy on the right? What? He's sexy. He is. He'll become a little bit more sexy when I tell you that he wrote probably 3 of the greatest novels in the history of language. Any ideas now? Dostoevsky at Russia.co. Yes, it's Fyodor Dostoevsky. He wrote, what did he write? Crime and Punishment, Brothers Karamazov, Notes from the Underground. But you look at him and you don't get that excited. And so I want to know, is there some biological thing, or is it a cultural construct? We'll talk about that. Why is it that we like alcohol so much? Some people like alcohol a lot. What is it that's going on? How does it have its effect? And why do some people have problems with it and other people don't? What else? Sorry, it's a little hard to see that. Is technology the end of evolution? So we've got things like Prozac here that can alter your mood, your brain chemistry. What else do we have? We have DNA fingerprinting that can give us information about paternity certainty, who do babies belong to. We have birth control. So the very thing that drives evolution, differences in reproductive success, we can now tinker with that as well. Does that mean that we are at the end of evolution? What else do we have? Money. Are we doomed to mismanage our money? Believe it or not, biology is going to give us some important insight into this question. And the answer is a little bit depressing. Does evolution doom us also to fail in our battles to maintain our weight? It is very sad. He's a young boy, but look, he is fat, right? I'm kidding. He's fine. But are there biological reasons why so many people have problems maintaining their weight? People want to weigh one thing, they weigh something else. What's going on? Why is it such a, apparently, human universal? As soon as people get enough money that they have easy access to food, weight becomes a problem. What about relationship issues? Are people doomed to mismanage their relationships as well? Can people remain faithful forever to their partner? Sorry, whoops, I'll go back. No. Fidelio, his hair is a problem as well. I think that is, it could be the same guy, possibly. I guess that answers our unconditional love question. Other things like, can evolution give us insight into ethics and morality? Lots of people actually think it can. We'll see why that turns out not to be true. Anyway, those are some things that we're going to talk about in this class. So hopefully it's a list that you can find something on here that you think you'll be interested in. If you can't, I'm worried about you. All right, let's move to the second item on our outline here. What's required of you? I gave you a syllabus, purple syllabus there. Okay, so let's say you get on an elevator and you push the button and the doors don't close. What do? You press it again. And you press it again and they don't close. What do you do then? Kick the elevator. You go like this, right? You go, and then what happens? It closes. That works. Pushing the button about 50 times, right? I know that because I've done it before. Seriously, though, let me tell you a study that someone did once that was related to this. They took some rodents and they put them in cages and they gave them a lever, and you push the lever and they get a pellet of food. Rats and mice can learn this relatively easily. They push the lever, after a matter of a couple of hours, they know, I push the lever, I get the food. So these researchers did what I think was pretty clever. They said, all right, we're going to insert a time delay so that you push the lever, 10 seconds later, a piece of food comes out. So sort of like you push the elevator button, and it might take a while for it to close. Question is, what do you think happened to these rodents who now have the time lag inserted in there? Well, about 2 weeks after they had done this, the researchers went and made detailed observations of the animals. First cage they looked in, the mouse pushed the lever, and it ran over to one corner, stuck its nose in the corner, ran to the back corner, stuck its nose in the corner, ran to this one, stuck its nose in the corner, fourth corner, stood in front of the tray, food came out. And the mouse kind of got the look on its face that said, I figured it out. They go to the next cage over, the mouse pushes the lever, does a backflip. They can do these backflips, sits there, does another backflip, sits there, does a third backflip, steps up to the tray, food comes out. Mouse thinks, I figured it out. They went down every cage. Every mouse had developed some sort of behavior where they would push the lever and they would always repeat this particular pattern, and then they would get the food. And in every case, they're thinking, like me, pushing the buttons like this, I figured it out. But the problem here, I mean, if you think there is a problem, I guess they don't since they get the food. I would say the problem is that the mice are not using the scientific method. That's why they do something that's really foolish, right? If they could just learn the scientific method. And so what I want to talk about today is probably, I would say, the most important thing we're going to talk about this quarter. And I would even argue that in the last 2,000 years of civilization, it's the single most important invention. The scientific method. That's how important I think it is. And what the scientific method is, in a general way, it's an organized, empirical, methodical way that you're going to find information out about the observable events in the universe. Or you could say this. This is a, I think, less useful way, but more precise. It enables us to reject hypotheses about how the world works. In other words, the world works in certain ways, and we want to know how it works. Or a lot of us want to understand how the world works, and we have to figure it out. And the scientific method is a method of doing this. In essence, it's a way to learn and understand about anything. There are people all over campus. You have professors who are in history, sociology, math, all sorts of different fields, and they are trying to understand the world. And everybody has methods that they choose for doing it. One of these is the scientific method, and it's the best. I'm not being facetious. Let's think about why I would make such a bold statement. What are some things about the universe that you might want to know? I made a quick list, I think, here of about 8 or 9 things. Should I take all my CDs and rip them as MP3s and then listen to them that way? Why might I not want to do that? I have about 700 CDs, aside from the fact that it'll take a long time. What would cause me to hesitate? They don't sound as good as MP3s, right? They're compressed. The music just is worse. If I want to know whether or not I should do that, scientific method will help me decide whether or not the sound quality is too bad. Is Rubio's better than Taco Bell? I eat at Rubio's almost every day. I should know whether it's better. Scientific method will help me figure that out. If you eat at Panda Express every day, will you get fatter? I love the orange chicken bowl. But should I go there whenever I want? I could figure that out. I could answer that question with the scientific method. Do you get better grades if you come to class or if you do the reading? Are movies more enjoyable when you watch them on the big screen rather than as DVDs? I would say definitely yes, but you have to collect the data. How could I do that? How could I use the scientific method to decide what's the answer to that question? Does consuming a bunch of water after you've been drinking alcohol reduce the extent of your hangover? Lots of people believe really passionately in this. My question to them is, how do you know that? Well, everybody knows. You just know. No, and I say, yeah, do some careful testing using the scientific method. So we want to understand, how can we do that? Does taking vitamins keep you from being sick? I had a long argument with Terry Burnham, my co-author here, because he takes vitamins. And I had to mock him repeatedly. Why do you take the vitamins? Give me the evidence that says these are making you healthier. Finally, he had to back down. He had to admit, I have no evidence, it's superstition. I want to keep doing it. Please quit bugging me. I said, we can't be friends. If that's the case, I said, you have to do this in a scientific method. So we're going to talk about the scientific method and what it is, because I want you to be able to use it. I like this quote. Dalai Lama said, if scientific research proves certain Buddhism teachings, you have to write this down, to be incorrect, I would agree that the teaching should be changed accordingly. That is a quality human being making a statement like that. I could ask you this question. I could say, is maze running ability in mice genetic? How might you apply the scientific method to figure that out? Some mice are good at running mazes. Other mice are terrible at it. Is it because of genetics or is it because of something else? These are examples of things where I'm just telling you how the world is, and I want to decide, what should we believe? How can we understand it better? And you need a tool that allows you to do that. So I'm going to try and give you one. I'll tell you one. First we'll talk about this. The first step of the scientific method, and it's not necessarily something that you say, okay, there are 4 steps. You don't really do it always in steps. It's not discrete. It's just sort of a way of being for me. In fact, I looked up the definition of religion in my American Heritage Dictionary, and it said, a cause, a principle, or an activity pursued with zeal or conscientious devotion. So if someone said, is the scientific method your religion, I would have to say yes, a cause, a principle, or an activity pursued with zeal or conscientious devotion. So step 1, make some observations. Here's an observation that you could make. Arnold took steroids and is huge. It's a true statement. He's admitted it in a biography. When he took them, it was not illegal. He's very muscular. I think one of the important things about science, scientists get a bad rap. People think science is boring. But step 1, make observations. That's the critical one. You can make observations about anything. I have a friend, Miranda, and Miranda studies the relatedness among different groups of, of crickets. She wants to know evolutionarily, how did the crickets split up? That's boring, right? To me, I'm not that interested in it, but this is where science can be either creative or not so creative. Choose interesting things to make observations about. So here's one that I think is kind of interesting. Arnold took steroids and is huge. The second step is going to be this. Formulate a hypothesis. In other words, you've looked at the world and you've said, Arnold took steroids, Arnold is huge. What's your hypothesis that you're going to be starting to formulate? I think there's a relationship between taking steroids and getting huge. And so when you formulate your hypothesis, you could say it this way. Taking steroids makes you muscular. The important things are these 2. Is it testable? Is it refutable? By that I mean, could you make some observation that would cause you to reject your hypothesis? This is really important. When people tell me things that they believe passionately, so for instance, Terry says, I think vitamins keep me from getting sick as much. I say, is there some information I could give you that would cause you to not believe that anymore? Seems reasonable, right? And so he says, all right, yeah. If I measured how often I got sick, and for maybe 6 months I took vitamins and every day assessed whether or not I had a cold and how severe it was, and then for 6 months I didn't, and if I found that in the periods where I took vitamins, I always was sick and I was sick for longer, he said, if that were the case, I would change what I think. That allows me to be friends with Terry again, because he is willing to give up a belief in the face of observation. That's important. He can refute this hypothesis he has, and he can test it. So when you're making hypotheses, after you have these observations in the world, you have to formulate a hypothesis that you can test, and depending on the observations you make, either you can refute it or not refute it. So then, and this is a critical aspect about science and the scientific method, you make a prediction. For your hypothesis to be valuable, you have to be able to make predictions about situations that have not yet occurred, about what will happen. That's why it's so useful. There are lots of things that I haven't done or situations I haven't been in, but I have expectations now because I have a lot of theories that I've tested that I'm able to make predictions about. So you just say, if X is true, then when we do Y, Z should happen. So you've got your hypothesis, and you just phrase it in a way that says, okay, when we do this thing, this experiment, which is step 4, we know what we're predicting in terms of the results that we're going to get at the end. So in the case of our steroids make you huge, what's our prediction? What's our experiment? Okay, somebody taking them. All right, so we're going to do a study. It was her. Hey, it was her idea. No, he's taking insulin or heroin. I forget. There's a difference. No, it's a good study. I wouldn't want to do it on little kids for a variety of reasons. But let's give steroids to some people, and let's measure whether or not they get bigger. And let's say they do get bigger. Then what are we going to conclude? Steroids make you bigger? What if, when I give you steroids, I inject testosterone into you, it causes you to want to work out more? And I already know that working out causes you to get muscular. So you step back, you're like, all right, so we don't mean that steroids make you huge. Steroids maybe make you do something that makes you huge. Or I don't know. How would we test that? Well, we'd inject some people with testosterone, and we would tie them to their couch and say, you can't work out. But it might make you want to eat more. So suddenly you get bigger, and your muscle mass goes up just by eating more. So this conducting of the experiment is pretty important. You have to set it up so that when you make your observations, people can't say, well, here's an alternative explanation for those results. You want to do it in such a way that you're testing your hypothesis. You want to control all the variables but one. In other words, I would say, I'm going to take 100 people in one group, and I'm going to take 100 people in another group, and I'm going to inject steroids into one of the groups, everyone once a week. And I'm going to not inject steroids. I'm going to maybe inject saline solutions like water into the other people just to control. Someone might say, oh, well, getting injected, they would do it in your butt. Getting injected in the butt causes you to become more muscular. It doesn't, but you just want to say, all right, well, even in this other group, we injected them, but it wasn't with steroids. So you control for everything. Then I would say, every day, I am going to deliver food to their houses. Everyone in the group, I'm going to say, you can only eat this food. And I'm going to control how much they can work out. I'm going to say, you can work out at the gym 30 minutes each day, and I'm going to watch you to make sure that you're not cheating. And I'm going to make sure that you sleep the exact same number of hours. I want the groups to be the same, except that one group has steroids and the other doesn't. Randomized is an important feature you'll hear about in studies. That means you don't just put a sign up at the gym and say, who wants to be in a steroid study? Because the people that sign up are going to be the guys who think, hey, I can do steroids legally here in a study. And the people who are in your control group maybe don't go to the gym at all. And so you have differences in their behavior. So I would first want to just randomly choose 100 names in the UCLA list of students and then say, okay, you're in this study. I would do it that way. So that means you're putting people into the groups without letting them choose whether they're in the treatment group or not. Double blind says that I might treat the guys that I inject with the testosterone, I might treat them differently because I expect them to be getting bigger. So if I every day get boxes and they're just 2 syringes and one says A, the other says B, I now don't even know whether I'm injecting testosterone or water. And the person doesn't know if they're in the experimental group or the control group. So you can rule out any effects of belief that you're going to get bigger or not bigger, which is important. So that would be called double blind. Blind is when the person doesn't know which group they're in. Double blind means that the person administering the treatment doesn't know which group they're in. So if you say something is randomized, controlled, double blind, that's like the holy grail of scientific method. If you then detect a difference between your experimental group and your control group, it's really hard to refute the fact that that difference is due to the treatment that you did. So I could rephrase ours here, given equal amounts of working out, food intake. There's no difference in the muscle mass of the people who take steroids and those who don't. I phrased it here in an odd, roundabout way. There's no difference between the groups. This is because there's something that you'll hear about every now and then called a null hypothesis. I don't want you to worry about it too much. But scientists like to phrase their hypothesis kind of as the opposite of what they think is going to happen. Because that way, when there is a difference, they say, well, we throw out the hypothesis that there's no effect of testosterone. And if you say you have to throw that out, that sort of means you're saying, we think it's because of the steroids. I won't go into that too much, but just sometimes you'll read about null hypothesis, which means you phrased it that there's no difference between the groups. And when you see a difference, you reject that, and you're saying that there is. As an evolutionary biologist, I like Charles Darwin. Almost all evolutionary biologists do. He has this quote in his book that makes me really respect him. This is in The Origin of Species, 1859. He wrote this. He said, "I will confine myself to one special difficulty, which at first appeared insuperable and actually fatal to the whole theory. I allude to the sterile females in insect communities. They cannot propagate their kind." So he had developed over the course of 500 or 600 pages this theory about how evolution works. But he had made an observation in the world that there were these species where the females didn't reproduce at all. And that's problematic, where his whole theory hinges on the ones that reproduce more, whatever traits they have, are going to increase in the population. And what's so great about Darwin is that he said, this doesn't work with my theory. I can't figure it out. And if this actually is just true, my theory fails. I have to throw it out. That takes guts, right, to write that in your book, to say, can't figure this one out, and if it turns out this is how the world really is, my theory is wrong. You have to be willing to throw out your hypotheses of the world. Here's a question that I want to pose for you. How many of you want to go to law school someday? Okay, so fair number. Eyewitness testimony is considered about the best possible thing that you can have if you are doing litigation and you're a prosecutor. Oops, here we're just my steady. Sorry. If you're a prosecutor and you bring someone into court and they sit on the witness stand and you say to them, what happened? And they sit there and they say, I saw that guy. He was at the crime scene. I saw him commit the murder. You say, no, but I was there. I saw it. Pretty much every time, you're going to jail. Yes, bad news. If you're a scientist and a lawyer, you're someone who thinks scientifically, you're going to think, just because I say, yes, I saw it, I want to know, is eyewitness testimony infallible? The assumption is that it is. Could I test this using the scientific method? How could I do this? Yeah, you could, but there's a more clever way you can do it. Stage one. Yes, what if, and I even thought about doing this, but it's a little too theatrical. Someone runs through that door, whacks me, takes my computer and runs out. We then could bring someone in and they could question you and you and you and you and you, and they could give you a lineup and say, did you see the guy who did it? And you say, yeah, I was sitting right in the classroom. I saw who did it. And then we present the people and you choose who. The beauty of this, unlike what you were saying, is that we know who did it because we set it up. So that way we can test whether or not eyewitness testimony is infallible. What do you think the answer is? My cousin Vinny. My cousin Vinny didn't hinge on eyewitness testimony. It was the posit traction on the wheels, the 2 skid marks. But you're right, he won. And that is good. So here we go. So we want to know, is it infallible? Obviously it is, or I wouldn't be showing you this. Here are the data. Someone set up a bunch of crimes, and instead of just saying yes or no, they did it 2 ways. In one case, they had 5 people stand there, and they had the person point who did it. In the other case, they had 5 people. First, one guy comes in, then the next guy, then the next guy, then the next guy. Same people, but given that they were just doing it in different ways, it should be exactly the same. They found that when they did the standard lineup, 30% of the time they identified people who said they had perfect confidence that they had seen the crime and they identified the person. 30% of the time they were wrong. If they did it sequentially, they got it wrong about 8% of the time. So I don't know which of these is better, but they differ. The fact that they differ says I have to throw out my hypothesis that the way I present witnesses influences whether or not they identify them properly or not. What's the conclusion that I can draw from this? I can say eyewitness reliability depends on the way suspects are presented. But that's a sneaky way of saying, it's not infallible. There are errors that creep in. This is really disturbing to a lot of people in the legal community. And a bunch of states, more than 10 states, have now made laws that say scientists cannot come into court and testify about the reliability of eyewitness testimony. Can you believe that? That's probably the most stunning thing I'm going to tell you all term. Courts have made a rule. Scientists can't come in because I'm going to tell you I did a study and they're not that good. What are they afraid of? I'm going to give you, this is our third take-home message, and I have just one more thing after this to show you. The scientific method, which I'll define as observations, hypotheses, predictions, tests, conclusions, is an efficient pathway to understanding the world. I'm going to give you one piece of data to ponder before next time. You don't have to write this down because I'll put this up next time. Here's the issue. London Times reported this. They said 1 in 7 fathers are not the real parent. As someone who's a father, stuff like this catches my attention. They said this: Cellmark Labs receives more than 10,000 requests a year for paternity testing. 1 in 5 has not been ordered by a court or child support agency. Of these, 1 case in every 7, the presumed father turns out to be the wrong man. If that were the case in a class of 200 here, how many of you would be buying Father's Day gifts for the wrong guy? Like 20 or more than 20? Is the conclusion valid? How would you design a better experiment? We'll talk about this on Tuesday. So I will see you then. Thanks for coming. Sorry about the test.